Billionaire Marcus Thorne watched in stunned silence as the maid's daughter, a wisp of a girl named Lily, pointed a trembling finger at his fiancée and declared, "She broke it on purpose." The accusation, delivered in a child's high, clear voice, sliced through the polite murmur of the penthouse party like a shard of glass. Every head turned. The clinking of champagne flutes ceased. On the marble floor, gleaming under the recessed lighting of the gallery hall, lay the shattered remains of the Nightingale automaton, a priceless 18th-century music box that had been in Marcus's family for generations. His fiancée, Isabella Vance Walton, stood over the wreckage, a perfect portrait of theatrical distress, her diamond necklace glittering against her swan-like neck. "Oh, Marcus, darling, I am utterly devastated," she had cried moments before, pressing a hand to her chest. "Your maid, Maria?" She was dusting, and her cloth must have caught it. It was so sudden. Maria, Lily's mother, stood frozen by the wall, her face the color of ash, a feather duster clutched in her hand like a useless shield. Fear radiated from her in waves. But now, this small, 7-year-old girl in a simple hand-me-down dress had stepped out from behind her mother's legs and rewritten the entire scene. "No," Lily said, her voice shaking but resolute. "Mama didn't touch it. You did. You pushed it." Isabella's carefully constructed mask of sorrow cracked, replaced by a flash of venomous fury. What an absolutely preposterous lie. "Marcus, this is what happens when you let these people bring their children to work. They're feral." She waved a dismissive hand, as if shooing away a fly. "Maria, control your daughter. Her imagination is running wild, and frankly, it's ruining a perfectly dreadful evening." Maria rushed forward, grabbing Lily's shoulder. "Lily, hush. Apologize to Ms. Vance Walton right now." But Lily stood her ground, her gaze locked on the powerful woman who held her mother's entire world in her perfectly manicured hands. Her eyes, wide and brown, weren't filled with malice, but with a strange, unnerving certainty. She wasn't just guessing. She was stating a fact she believed to be as solid as the marble beneath her feet. Marcus looked from Isabella's indignant face to Maria's terrified one, and finally to the small, unblinking girl. Something in the child's stance, the quiet dignity in her defiance, gave him pause. It was a silence more potent than Isabella's loud, theatrical denial. He saw not a tantrum, but a testimony. Maria's life was a study in quiet precision and invisibility. She moved through the opulent spaces of Marcus Thorne's penthouse like a ghost, her presence marked only by the absence of dust and the perfect alignment of throw pillows. She taught Lily the same rules: be silent, be small, be unseen. Their own home was a tiny, 2-room apartment above a laundromat, a world away from the floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist art of Marcus's sky-high residence. It smelled of bleach and her mother's tired sighs, but it was also a sanctuary filled with the memory of one man, Sergeant Elias Vance, Maria's father and Lily's grandfather. He had been a master watchmaker, a horologist whose uncanny skill with intricate mechanisms was honed in the sterile, high-stakes environment of military ordnance. He repaired everything from bomb timers to the complex chronometers used for naval navigation. He had passed away 2 years ago, but his presence lingered in a heavy, wooden chest that held his tools, his journals, and his legacy. For Lily, that chest was a treasure trove. While other children played with dolls, she played with loops and tweezers, learning to handle gears no bigger than a grain of rice. Her grandfather's voice was a constant echo in her mind, a folksy litany of mechanical wisdom. "Everything has a heartbeat, Lily Bug," he'd say, his large, calloused hands guiding her tiny ones. "A clock, a watch, a music box, they're all just telling a story in a language of ticks and clicks. You just have to be quiet enough to listen." He taught her to see, not just to look. He'd show her a watch and ask, "What do you see?" She'd list the hands, the numbers. He'd shake his head. "No, look closer. See the tiny scratch on the crystal? That's where a man checked the time while laying bricks. See the faint wear on the winding crown? That's the oil from his thumb, turning it every single morning for 40 years. These aren't just objects, kiddo. They're memory keepers." Lily carried that wisdom within her, a private truth in a world that only saw her as the maid's daughter. She saw the stress fractures in the world around her, the hidden gears turning behind people's eyes. She saw the weariness in her mother's posture and the brittle arrogance in Isabella's smile. The tension in the gallery hall was thick enough to breathe. Isabella, recovering her composure, adopted a tone of bored, aristocratic amusement. She turned her venom on Maria. Well, this is a delightful turn of events. Not only are you incompetent, but you've raised a pathological liar. I think your employment here is terminated, effective immediately. Maria's face crumpled. No, please, Miss Vance Walton. She's just a child. She didn't mean it. We need this job. The plea was raw, desperate. It was the sound of a woman on the edge of an abyss. Isabella smiled, a thin, cruel curve of her lips. She saw an opportunity not just for dismissal, but for sport. Oh, I'm sure you do. Very well. She gestured grandly at the broken automaton. Let's make a little wager. Your daughter claims to know so much about this trinket. If she's so clever, let her fix it. A ripple of shocked laughter went through the assembled guests. The Nightingale automaton was a masterpiece of clockwork and artistry, crafted by a legendary Swiss artisan. Experts had flown in from Europe just to service it. The idea of a child repairing it was beyond absurd. It was a joke designed to inflict maximum humiliation. Fix a priceless museum piece. Isabella continued, her voice dripping with condescension. If, by some miracle, she can make that little bird sing again by morning, you can keep your job. But when she fails, and she will fail, not only will you be fired, I will personally see to it that your name is blacklisted at every domestic agency in this city. You won't even be able to find work scrubbing floors. How does that sound, Maria? A fair trade for your daughter's insolence. The threat was a guillotine, hanging over Maria's head. It was a calculated act of cruelty, designed to crush her spirit completely. Maria began to sob, a quiet, defeated sound. She reached for Lily, ready to drag her away, to beg, to do anything to escape this nightmare. But Lily stepped forward, her small chin lifted. Into the charged silence, she spoke two words that changed everything. I can. The audacity of it stunned the room. The laughter died in people's throats, replaced by a collective, disbelieving gasp. Isabella's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second. She had expected tears, apologies, groveling. She had not expected this quiet, unshakable confidence from a 7-year-old in a faded dress. You can what? Isabella sneered, her voice sharp. You can make a fool of yourself? Darling, you've already accomplished that. But Marcus Thorne stepped forward, his eyes fixed on Lily. He had built an empire on his ability to read people, to see past the bluster and find the bedrock of truth. He saw no childish fantasy in Lily's eyes. He saw the same focused intensity he saw in his best engineers and most brilliant coders. He saw genius. How? Marcus asked, his voice a low rumble that cut through the tension. How would you fix it? Lily didn't look at the crowd or the glittering, hostile woman before her. She knelt beside the wreckage, her small fingers hovering over the splintered wood and tangled brass without touching. Her voice was soft, as if she were speaking to the broken object itself. You don't fix something like this from the outside, she said, her words a near-perfect echo of her grandfather's teachings. You have to find its heart. The mainspring is probably fine, and the bellows for the bird call are protected. But the governor, the part that makes the music smooth, it's a fly fan governor. They're delicate. The fall probably broke one of the gears that turns it. You have to listen to the silence where the sound should be. She looked up at Marcus, her expression serious. Grandpa taught me how to listen. The room was utterly still. She spoke of fly fan governors and mainsprings with the easy familiarity of a master craftsman. It was so unexpected, so profoundly out of place, that it short-circuited every assumption the onlookers had made about her. Isabella scoffed, trying to regain control. She's just repeating things she's overheard. It's nonsense. Marcus, in this farce. But Marcus didn't look at Isabella. He was captivated. He made a decision. All right, he said, his voice resonating with authority. Show us. Marcus, you can't be serious. Isabella hissed, her composure finally shattering. You're going to let this child, touch a priceless heirloom based on some sentimental babble? But Marcus's gaze was firm. She seems to know more about it than anyone else in this room, including the so-called experts I pay a fortune to maintain it. We will give her a chance. He turned to his head of security. Clear the library. Bring a table, a good lamp. and my father's old watch repair kit. Isabella, cornered and furious, saw her power over the situation slipping away. She played her final, cruel card. Fine, she spat, her voice low and menacing, directed at Maria. Let the little circus act perform. But my offer stands. When she fails, your life as you know it is over. Maria looked at her daughter, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. Fear warred with a tiny, flickering spark of hope. She had seen Lily at her grandfather's workbench, had watched her reassemble a ship's chronometer that had baffled a professional. She knew what her daughter was capable of. With a deep breath, she nodded at Lily, a silent transfer of trust and courage. The library was a cathedral of knowledge, lined with leather-bound books that smelled of time and paper. A large mahogany table was cleared, a bright angle-poised lamp creating a pool of intense light. Marcus himself placed the velvet-lined tray of his father's tools on the table. The guests, their party forgotten, crowded into the doorway, craning their necks to witness the impossible spectacle. Lily, seemingly oblivious to the dozens of eyes on her, climbed onto the large chair. She laid the broken pieces of the automaton out on a clean cloth, her movements deliberate and reverent. She picked up a loop, fitting it to her eye with the practiced ease of a jeweler. For a long moment, there was only the sound of breathing. Then, her small hands, guided by a wisdom far beyond her years, began to work. She didn't force anything. She nudged, she listened, she felt. The guests watched, mesmerized. The child's focus was absolute, her dexterity breathtaking. The initial air of mockery had long since evaporated, replaced by a growing sense of awe. This wasn't a child playing. This was a master at work. As she worked, Lily began to speak, not to the audience, but as if thinking aloud, cataloging her process. The camshaft is intact, the pins aren't bent. That's good. That means the bird's movements will still be right. Her small screwdriver, held with perfect poise, moved from one tiny screw to the next. But this gear, she murmured, pointing with a pair of fine-tipped tweezers. This is from the timing train. See the marks on the teeth? They're not worn down from use. They're gouged, like something was forced against them. She looked up from her work for a moment, her magnified eye blinking in the bright light. A fall wouldn't do this. A fall is chaos. This is angry. The word hung in the silent room. Angry. It was a forensic diagnosis, a quiet accusation embedded in mechanical observation. Isabella, standing at the edge of the crowd with her arms crossed, let out a sharp, derisive laugh. Oh, this is rich. Now she's a mechanical psychic? What would a child know of metallurgy or force dynamics? She's making it up as she goes along. She tried to catch Marcus's eye, to share a moment of condescending solidarity, but he wasn't looking at her. His entire being was focused on the small girl at the table. He leaned closer, his expression one of intense concentration. What do you mean, forced? He asked quietly, ignoring his fiancée completely. Lily didn't look up. Grandpa said tools leave a signature. So do people. When something breaks by accident, it tells one story. When it's broken on purpose, it tells another. This one is telling me it didn't want to break. The simple, profound statement landed with the weight of a judge's gavel. Lily wasn't just fixing the music box. She was reading its testimony, uncovering the truth of its final moments. Isabella's face paled. The quiet confidence of the child was becoming more damning than any shouted accusation. She had intended to humiliate the maid and her daughter, but the spectacle was slowly, inexorably turning against her. The climax arrived not with a bang, but with a tiny, metallic click. The room seemed to hold its collective breath, the silence so profound it felt like a physical presence. Lily carefully lifted a minuscule piece of brass with her tweezers and placed it on the white cloth, separate from the other components. The pool of light from the lamp made it gleam. It was a sheared pin, no bigger than an eyelash. The moment slowed, stretching into an eternity. Every detail was magnified. The intense focus in Lily's eye behind the loop, the tremor in her mother's clasped hands, the faint sheen of sweat on Isabella's upper lip. Here, Lily said, her voice soft but carrying in the stillness. This is the heart of the problem. She used the tip of the tweezers to point. This is the pivot for the escapement lever. A fall onto a thick carpet might bend a pivot. It might even snap it, but the break would be jagged. This one, she nudged it gently. This one is sheared clean off. It's a torsion fracture. She finally looked up, her gaze sweeping past Marcus to land directly on Isabella. That happens from pressure. A lot of pressure, twisted hard. Like when a thumb pushes down right here. She pointed to a spot on the automaton's casing, while the other hand twists the winding key the wrong way. A key that was already fully wound, the crowd gasped. It was a sequence of events so specific, so deliberate, it could not be accidental. It was a perfect description of sabotage. Isabella's face, once a mask of arrogant beauty, was now a crumbling ruin of denial. She's lying. It's an insane, elaborate lie. But her voice was shrill, laced with panic. At that moment, Maria, her fear finally burned away by a fierce, protective pride, stepped forward. In her hands, she held a worn, leather-bound journal. "My daughter does not lie," she said, her voice shaking with emotion but ringing with truth. "My father was Sergeant Elias Vance. He was a master horologist for the 22nd Ordnance Battalion. He didn't just fix watches, he designed and repaired bomb timers, navigation equipment, things that had to be perfect. He taught Lily everything he knew." She opened the journal. On the yellowed page, in her father's precise, elegant script, was an intricate schematic. It was a technical drawing of a fly fan governor and escapement mechanism, identical to the one inside the Nightingale automaton. The revelation settled over the room, stunning the guests into absolute silence. The maid's daughter wasn't just a clever child. She was the heir to a legacy of genius, a quiet prodigy whose skill was passed down not through wealth or status, but through love and a shared passion for the secret life of machines. The truth, once revealed, was undeniable. The schematic in the journal, the sheared pin on the cloth, the child's calm, irrefutable explanation, it all formed a perfect, damning picture. Marcus Thorne looked from the incredible drawing in the old book to the tiny, sheared piece of metal. Then his gaze, now cold as ice, settled on Isabella. He saw everything with a sudden, brutal clarity. Her petty cruelties to the staff, her casual disdain for anyone she deemed beneath her, the way she had so quickly and smoothly blamed Maria. It was a pattern of behavior he had inexcusably overlooked. He had been looking, but he hadn't been seeing. "Isabella," he said, his voice dangerously quiet, yet it carried to every corner of the silent library. "You have made a grave error in judgment. Not just tonight, but for some time. You have 5 minutes to gather your personal effects from your room. My head of security will escort you from the premises." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "We are finished." Her downfall was swift and absolute. The theatrical outrage, the aristocratic condescension, it all dissolved into a desperate, sputtering panic. "Marcus, you can't believe this ridiculous story. You're choosing the word of a servant's child over me." "I am choosing the truth," he replied, his voice leaving no room for argument. And the truth is not a matter of social standing. The collective stare of his business partners, his friends, and his staff was a physical force. There was no support for her here, no quarter. Stripped of her borrowed power, Isabella was exposed and alone. With a strangled sob of fury and humiliation, she turned and fled the room. A moment of stunned silence followed her departure, and then one of the older guests, a respected venture capitalist, began to clap. It was a slow, deliberate applause. Another joined in, then another, until the entire room, from the wealthiest investor to the youngest catering staff, was applauding. But they weren't applauding Isabella's exit. They were applauding the small girl in the faded dress who had, with quiet courage and extraordinary skill, brought the truth into the light. Marcus knelt, bringing himself down to Lily's eye level. The vast height difference between the billionaire and the child vanished. In that moment, they were equals, two people connected by a shared respect for truth and craftsmanship. "Lily," he said, his voice thick with an emotion she didn't quite understand. "Your grandfather would be so incredibly proud of you. I am so sorry. For what she did, and for what I failed to see." He then turned his gaze to Maria, who was watching with tears streaming down her face. Tears not of fear, but of overwhelming pride and relief. "Maria," he said, standing up, "from this day forward, you will never have to worry about finding work again. In fact, I'd like to offer you a new position, if you'll accept it." He smiled warmly. "I am creating a new fellowship within my educational foundation. It will be dedicated to fostering gifted young people in the fields of mechanical arts, engineering, and design. We'll provide scholarships, workshops, and mentorship. He looked back down at Lily, who was carefully placing the sheared pin into a small envelope. I believe it should be called the Elias Vance Fellowship, and I can't think of a better person to run it than his daughter. And its first honorary scholar. Well, I think we know who that is. The offer was more than a job, more than charity. It was a restoration of dignity. It was a chance to turn a legacy of private passion into a public good. It was material and moral vindication, delivered in a single, life-altering moment. For the first time all night, Maria smiled, a brilliant, beautiful expression of hope. She looked at Lily, her brilliant, impossible daughter, and knew their lives had been irrevocably changed. Lily, in her simple way, understood. She looked at Marcus and gave him a small, shy nod. Then she turned her attention back to the table. "Can I finish now?" she asked. "The nightingale still needs to sing." 6 months later, the Elias Vance Institute for Mechanical Arts was a reality. It wasn't a sterile corporate facility, but a bright, airy workshop filled with sunlight, the smell of machine oil, and the excited chatter of children. Sunlight streamed through large industrial windows, illuminating workstations equipped with everything from antique watchmaking lathes to modern 3D printers. Lily, now 8 years old, stood on a small stool, patiently guiding another child's hands as they assembled a complex gear train. She wore a small, custom-made apron embroidered with the Institute's logo, a nightingale perched on a clock gear. Her quiet confidence had blossomed. She was no longer just a keeper of her grandfather's wisdom, but a teacher, passing it on. Maria moved through the space with an air of purpose and grace. As the Institute's director, she had discovered an aptitude for organization and leadership she never knew she possessed. The fear that had once shadowed her features was gone, replaced by a calm, dignified strength. Marcus Thorne was a frequent visitor, not as a remote benefactor, but as an active participant. Today, he sat at a workbench, a loupe fixed to his eye, frowning in concentration as he tried to repair his own father's vintage wristwatch under Lily's expert tutelage. "You're forcing it, Marcus," she said gently, her small hand steadying his. "Remember what Grandpa said? You have to listen to the metal. It'll tell you which way it wants to go." He smiled, humbled and grateful. The work grounded him, connecting him to a world of tangible skill and real truth that his corporate life had insulated him from. As for Isabella, her social and financial ruin had been absolute. Ostracized from the circles she once dominated, she had vanished from public life. A recent, unconfirmed report mentioned she was seen doing mandatory community service at an animal shelter, humbled and anonymous. On a pedestal in the center of the workshop, encased in a climate-controlled glass box, sat the nightingale automaton. It was perfect. Lily picked up a small, ornate key. With a gentle wind, she set it in motion. A hush fell over the workshop as the tiny, intricate bird came to life, opening its beak and releasing a stream of music so pure and clear it felt like hope made audible. The song filled the room, a testament to a legacy rescued, a future rebuilt, and the simple, powerful truth that genius can be found in the most unexpected of places.